Hello and welcome into another edition of Snakes Territory. I'm Jesse Friedman alongside Jack Sommers of Arizona Diamondbacks on SI. And Jack, the Diamondbacks once again found a way to avoid complete disaster. They salvaged the series finale in Philadelphia. They avoid the sweep. It was a crazy game, which I feel like is something we've said a lot lately. The Diamondbacks had a 7-1 lead. The Phillies came all the way back to tie the game in the ninth inning as Shelby Miller blew the save. And then the Diamondbacks come back in the 10th, put up 3 runs in the top half. They allowed 1 run in the bottom half and ultimately come away with an 11-9 win. Jack, games like this just feel like par for the course lately.
It was a bit nerve-wracking, but like you said, they did avoid the sweep. It's interesting to note that they haven't been swept, so there's that. I mean, this team fights and tries to scratch out every win they possibly can. You have to love the way they at least bounce back and find a way to salvage. Hopefully, they won't be in salvage mode too much often. But at this point, we'll have to take what we get.
This was, again, just a crazy back and forth game, the type of game that the Diamondbacks seemingly play every single day. A game that felt very comfortably within their grasp. Eduardo Rodriguez was pitching pretty well. And then the sixth inning came, Jack, and Eduardo left, I believe it was 2 guys on base, first and second, 1 out. He was able to get through 5 1/3. Had thrown a pretty decent game when he left. The Diamondbacks still had that 7-2 lead at that point. And then Juan Murillo, who has been very good for the Diamondbacks this season, had not allowed a run entering this game. He threw a cement mixer slider right down the middle to Weston Wilson, and Wilson deposited that into the left field seats. And suddenly a 7-2 game became 7-5. And the Diamondbacks bullpen has continued to struggle, Jack. And this is something that, unfortunately, it feels like we're going to be talking about a whole lot with AJ Puck now on the 60-day IL, with Justin Martinez on the 15-day. Although it sounds like there's been some good news on that front lately. We'll talk more about that later in the show. But this is just the reality of the Diamondbacks bullpen right now, where they're playing a lot of close games, so it feels like these guys are heavily taxed all the time. And beyond that, they just don't have a whole lot of great options to go to right now.
Well, today they had their best options, and it's still the only one that managed to throw a scoreless inning was Ryan Thompson.
Right.
Murillo and Kevin Ginkel, Jalen Beeks, and of course Shelby Miller. They all gave up runs today. The only one that did not was Ryan Thompson. So you had all of your A bullpen out there, and they still made this a nail biter. Murillo is almost kind of getting into that category, or so we thought, of being a guy that you really could depend on in a tight situation. So we'll have to see how he rebounds from, giving up that home run. On another note, though, poor Erod. It's just unbelievable. Um, I think that it's good that the offense got going. They had only scored a couple of runs in the first couple of games each, and so at least they put 7 runs early on the board. I mean, listening to the broadcast, you would think they were getting no hit because they have to go through a stretch of a few innings where they weren't able to tack on before they did so again in the ninth. That Grichuk double was huge, obviously, to drive in a run. Without that, they would have lost the game. So kudos to him. He's been battling through a tough stretch. I think he felt the effects of not playing enough. He basically didn't play for 2 weeks, and then he goes into a slump when the playing time does come. Big surprise there. These guys all need enough reps to stay sharp. So hopefully that's a guy from the right side that'll get going here.
You mentioned Eduardo Rodriguez and poor Erod, which I think is something we've maybe said a few times on this show. It's hard to know what to make of the season he's had so far. I mean, on one hand, Erod had 10 strikeouts today, and he's had several games like that where the strikeout numbers have really run up in a way that we had not seen at all last season. I guess maybe there was the one game in Colorado, right? But otherwise, he was a little bit lean in the strikeouts department. And then this season, he's striking out. I think he's at 10.7 per 9 innings right now, which if you had told me at the beginning of the season that Eduardo Rodriguez was going to be at 10.7 Ks per nine, whatever we are, 6, 7 starts into his season. I think it's 7 at this point. I probably would have said he's having a great year. Like if Eduardo Rodriguez is striking out almost 11 guys per 9 innings, that's a really good sign. And yet we're still talking about a guy who has a 5.92 ERA. And it feels, Jack, like the kind of the same story every time out, where he looks dominant in certain moments and he dots corners in beautiful ways and throws pitches every now and then that kind of look unhittable. But he's still giving up more hits than you would usually expect for a guy who's generating this much swing and miss. And he also had 4 walks in the game today, and then he got bit by a term that I learned today for the first time: bequeathed runners, which is basically the other side of an inherited runner. When Eduardo Rodriguez has left guys on base that relievers have inherited, those runners, as Jack pointed out on Twitter earlier today, those runners, there have been 6 of them, and 4 of them have scored, including both that he bequeathed to Juan Merito in this game. So what do you make of the season that Eduardo Rodriguez has had so far, Jack?
I got a text from one of my writers saying he found it just super interesting and hysterical that Eduardo's response to all the defensive issues he's had behind him this year is to just go and strike everybody out.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I mean, last time he pitched, I think, it was like, oh my God, this guy's terrible. He's never going to be good again. That really was a shelling, gave up 8 runs, 3 home runs in the game.
Yeah.
But in every other game he's pitched, it really does feel and look and measurably can see that he's had some bad luck. I mean, all the numbers that we can look at, his 5.92 ERA, but he's got a 4.03 FIP and a 3.36 xFIP. So those metrics feel like if it just had average luck on fly balls, given up a couple less home runs. You mentioned the 4 of 6 bequeathed runners. He's given up 4 unearned runs, going back to the defensive issues. It just seems like balls in play, poor relief support, poor defensive support. It's all been like taking turns building up on him. Today, the last batter he faced, Mundo Sosa, it looked like he kind of got him on a check swing, and he did not, and he ended up walking him. It was his last batter. And just the look on Eduardo's face was just like, oh, man, come on, really? You could just see the exasperation on his face today. So I felt bad for the guy. I think that if he can just somehow pull his results into what you hope that the results regress towards the expected stats mean versus the other way around, which has been the opposite situation for one other starter in the rotation.
Well, we have a whole lot more to get to about Sunday's game as well as the Phillies series as a whole. Some injury news with Corbin Burnes, a whole lot to get to in this episode. But first, here are a few quick words from the guys over at Foul Territory.
FT fan by now, if you're buying, selling, trading, collecting cards, Arena Club is the spot. We've been talking about them all season long, but I do want to focus on the slab pack experience, Kratz, since you've been ripping some slab packs digitally. And what happens?
I mean, as a kid, you wanted to rip open the packs. How can they do this digitally? Oh, baby. This is exciting. How the graphics come out and everything. And oh, yeah, the card that you pull, you can actually get that, John, physically. So it's perfect. It's all in one place, and it's a super exciting experience.
Yeah, they send that to you from the vault if you want it. But if you look at it and you're like, it's not the card for me, I want to sell it back, go for it. You can do any of that on Arena Club, and you can acquire the best value for your money with those slab packs, transparent checklists, and Arena Club's Slab Safe program. Right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/foul and use code FOUL. arenaclub.com/foul, use code FOUL.
Well, Jack, it seems a little bit unfair that we've gotten 10 minutes into this episode and we have yet to mention Jose Herrera, who had a very big game for the Diamondbacks on Sunday. It was a big part of them coming away with a win. He went 2 for 4 with a single and a double, although I should mention that the single one hopped the left field fence. It was one of the farther singles that you'll see. And yeah, he came through in a couple big spots for the Diamondbacks in this game. Obviously, he has not contributed much offensively to this point in the season, so you're not necessarily counting on him to be a big part of the offense. Still good to see him kind of get going nonetheless.
At one point early in this game, this looked like it was going to be the Jose Herrera game. Our good
Yes.
friend Al Weiner tweeted that out, and we were saying the exact same thing in our private chat. So, unfortunately, he also had a pass ball, and I think there was another wild pitch that got by him that really could have been blocked.
Yeah.
And that's not been a strength for him. So that was kind of the downside to his game. But when Jose Herrera, pounds the ball like that, drives in a couple of runs with a couple of hits, including the double, it's a good day.
And he really came through with a big hit in the fourth inning, which wound up being a huge reason that the Diamondbacks got out to the lead that they did. It was pretty impressive. I mean, Josh Naylor grounded out, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. struck out, and then Tim Tawa just sort of floated a single to right field to keep the inning going. And then before you know it, you've got a Garrett Hampson walk, a Jose Herrera 2-run double, a Geraldo Perdomo single. Perdomo then stole second and third, and then Corbin Carroll singled him home, and the Diamondbacks turned what looked to be a complete nothing inning into a 4-run outburst, and that allowed them to get out to that 7-1 lead that they had early in this game. So we should also mention Geraldo Perdomo here. If you're joining us on YouTube, you can see on the screen 4 for 5 with 2 doubles, 3 RBI, 2 stolen bases. He also drew a walk that brought in a run in this game. You and I were talking about this before we hopped on, that it was kind of funny for me watching the highlight video of Geraldo Perdomo's 4 hits, because like all of them were just ground balls in the vicinity of Alec Bohm that he just like couldn't make a play on for one reason or another. Not to say that Bohm should have made all of those plays, but maybe he could have made 1 or 2 of them. It wasn't a great day for Alec Bohm out there, but still just a huge day for Perdomo, Jack, in a game where Ketel Marte was not in the lineup. We figured that Ketel was going to be sitting every now and then as he kind of gets eased back into things here, and Perdomo was back up there in the leadoff spot, and he gave the Diamondbacks really everything they could have hoped for.
Yeah, Jesse, I think that it's time really to start pounding the drums a little bit for Perdomo's All-Star candidacy. Those ballots will be coming out actually pretty soon. I think sometime in mid-May they hit, and it's he's got better numbers than just about any shortstop in the National League. If you look at OPS, RBIs, WAR, everything is favoring him. Just the way he took off and stole second and third base today. I mean, it's really amazing how he manages to maximize every bit of talent that he has and does a little bit of everything pretty darn well. The fact that he's hitting as well as he is this year, it'd be wonderful if it's sustainable. If it is, then he truly has become a star. And that's something that Diamondbacks couldn't be more pleased about, considering the extension that they signed him to and just what he means to this team overall. When you get good games from Geraldo Perdomo, you probably got a good chance to win.
You made a good point about him just maximizing his skill set. Like, I think Perdomo is athletic, but he's probably not like the most athletic player on the Diamondbacks, or even, I don't know if he's even in the top 5. But you look at some of the numbers on him, and I know we're still early in the season, but he's at 5 outs above average right now, which ranks in the 99th percentile. Like, according to that, he's been one of the best defenders in all of baseball. And then you mentioned the 2 stolen bases. He's up to 9 on the season. We could have more fun with on-pace stats and say that Geraldo Perdomo's on pace to steal about 40 to 45 bases this year. And then, of course, what he's doing offensively now with an OPS in the 870s. It's been really impressive across the board. I do want to step back now and look at this series as a whole, though. The Sunday game, the Diamondbacks did find a way to come away with a win there, but the reality is that they were just trying to avoid a sweep. and they still lost the 2 games prior to that. They have now lost 4 out of the last 5 series as a whole. This weekend, Jack, in Philadelphia was not exactly a success for them.
It was not a happy weekend, to be sure. And I think that at the end of the day, I mean, both pitching and hitting are faltering too often to only come up with 2 runs in each of those 2 games. If you go back, basically since that 10-run 8th inning against the Cubs on the 18th, basically from that point forward until today, I think the most runs it scored in any one game was 6, if I'm not mistaken. Could have been 7. And overall, they averaged 3.8 runs a game during that 13-game stretch. So this clearly has been an issue, getting consistency, situational hitting. But it's not just the situational hitting. It's just hitting in general has been down. And that was really on display, Jesse, in the first couple games of this series. The other thing, just going back to Perdomo real quick, I did want to mention he's got 29 RBIs. Shohei Ohtani has 11. So I just wanted to throw that out.
There we go. That means that Perdomo is what, about 3 times the player that Shohei Ohtani is? I think the math checks out.
It checks out.
Yeah. So going back to this series, like the Saturday game in my mind was kind of whatever. Like Brandon Pfaadt's been so good for the D-backs this year, and he had a bit of a clunker, and the D-backs lost 7-2. Like those games are going to happen every now and then. Pfaadt, I don't want to say he was due for a game like that, but it's more than acceptable that he had a game like that given the season he's had. The Friday game, though, Jack, that was the one that in my mind felt very, very winnable if you're the Diamondbacks. You had Merrill Kelly out there on the mound, just totally mowing him down. He gives up a run early. He works his way through 5 innings. It only allowed 1 run at that point. I believe his pitch count was in the low 60s, and then we get the Merrill Kelly cramp thing happening again, right? His pitch count was at 60. It was at 60 pitches, 42 strikes, just totally cruising. And he wound up having to leave the game very suddenly. And granted, the D-backs offense didn't do much that day. It's another game where they just scored the 2 runs, but they probably could have scored a whole lot more. They had 10 hits in the game. They left 7 on base. They went 2 for 9 with runners in scoring position. They definitely could have scored more, but on the pitching side, Merrill Kelly was pitching so well that it felt like the Diamondbacks might not even need to score any more runs in order to win that game. But then with Merrill leaving the game early, suddenly Juan Murillo had to come in the 6th inning, and the Diamondbacks wound up having to use Jose Castillo, who they had just called up from AAA Reno. And I think it's safe to say Castillo probably isn't needed in that game if Merrill is able to continue on. So that Friday game was a stinger. And you could really say like the Diamondbacks very easily could have won this series. Maybe even if Merrill Kelly had just not had the cramping issue and been able to keep going.
I think part of this was the way it happened. The upsetness that was caused by seeing Merrill walk off the mound again in that situation. The fact that Castillo grooved those 2 pitches and gave up the home runs to left-hand batters certainly was a tough pill to swallow. But I'm going to counterpoint a little bit here. Over the final 4 innings, the bullpen gave up 2 runs. What's the Phillies' record when they give up 2 runs in that ballpark? It must be phenomenal. You're just not going to go into Citizens Bank Ballpark and beat the Philadelphia Phillies in that park, scoring just 2 runs.
Sure.
And so, to my mind, that game was lost because of the offense, not because of the pitching, not because of Castillo. In the flow of the game and the narrative, yes, the 2 home runs is what lost the game because they were the tying go-ahead runs. But they scored 2 runs. And you can't win in Citizens Bank Ballpark scoring 2 runs. They got good enough pitching to win that game. That game was on the offense. That's my view.
I think that's fair. You're right. Like the pitching as a whole, even though, yeah, that the 1 inning where Castillo grooved the 2 pitches wasn't great. Like, yeah, your pitching only gave up 3 runs in the game. You figure the offense should be able to do enough to overcome that. At the same time, I do think that it is very difficult when one of your best starting pitchers unpredictably just has to leave games early on a pretty regular basis, right? I mean, it's not every game, but it's happened a couple times this year. There's obviously a history here as well. For a while, it seemed like it was just a Chase Field problem, and I think that is pretty clearly no longer the case, as it happened here at Citizens Bank Park. You feel for Merrill Kelly because you know that this isn't something where he's not just not doing what he needs to get his body right. We have no reason to believe that. We have no reason to believe that the D-backs are not trying, that their training staff is not trying to figure this out. We've heard that Merrill Kelly is the most hydrated man on earth when he pitches, right? Like I think they've kind of covered their bases here on that front, but it's tough. I mean, this isn't really something I've seen before, Jack. Like I can't remember another team that, one of their top starting pitchers just consistently has to leave games early, not because of a serious injury, but just because of cramping that just sort of pops up every now and then.
Jesse, I'm going to get myself into trouble here again.
I'm excited. What does that mean?
I'm going to veer off into sharing my thoughts. And I just, again, need to give the caveat. These are just things that are going on in my head. They're not facts. They're not things that I can point to. It's not reporting. So, but I'm here to talk and share my opinions and my thoughts. Last year, towards the end of the year, I asked Merrill, I said, aside from hydration, have the training staff and doctors looked at the possible connection to your vascular issues that you've had? I mean, he had thoracic outlet surgery on his shoulder. He had a blood clot in his leg in June of 23, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, have they looked at the possible connection there? And at that time, he told me that they had not. And it was all focused on the hydration issues. So I find it hard to believe that they haven't gone down that pathway at this point. And I played Google Doc on this and spent quite a lot of time searching around. And, it's a dangerous thing to even bring up or to discuss. But I have a high level of concern for Merrill Kelly because I really like Merrill Kelly as a person. He's one of the smartest people we get to talk to. He's got a great dry sense of humor. He's very open and willing to discuss what's going on. So from a media perspective, he's great. He's great in that clubhouse. And he's somebody, the more you get to know these guys, you get to care about them as people. And so I have a level of concern here that goes well beyond baseball and a pitcher being pulled off the mound for a cramp. And I hope they get to the bottom of it. And I hope that they are able to rule out that it's connected to vascular issues, because if it is, it's actually quite a dangerous thing. So that's why I'm saying it out loud. It's just because of a level of concern as a human being, not as somebody that knows everything. I'm just sharing my thoughts and concerns.
Yeah, and I'm sure the Diamondbacks are racking their brains over this and probably have been for the last year or two, just still having not been able to find a solution that works. And again, I feel for Merrill Kelly on a personal level because I know the competitor that he is, and that this probably hurts him more than anyone, right? Like I'm sure he takes this really, really hard every time it happens. And the reality is, I was looking at some of these numbers the other day. Like the Diamondbacks at some point, Jack, are going to have to win games with their pitching because the offense has had a dry spell. like that is true. But this team has scored 176 runs this year. That's more than the Giants. It's more than the Padres. It is right up there with the Dodgers. It's more than every single team in the National League, every other team in the National League except for the Cubs, who are somehow up in the 200s. The Cubs have had a just insane offense this year. But I mean, that was kind of the narrative coming into 2025, right? Was you figured the offense was still going to be good. It was probably going to regress a little bit, but it was still going to be good. But if the pitching was able to compensate for that enough, then you could still be in a good place. You could even be a better team than this team was a year ago. And that's not to say that it all falls on Merrill Kelly by any means, right? I mean, he's actually been probably the most consistent starter on the team, him and Brandon Pfaadt, right? But the Diamondbacks really, I mean, they are going to have to find ways to win games with their pitching at some point. We just haven't seen a ton of that this year, and it's hard to win a game with Merrill Kelly when these kinds of things continue to happen.
And these kinds of things are continuing to happen, right, Jesse?
Yeah.
And we have another topic coming up that's pretty much is the elephant in the room here.
Yeah. So on that happy note, we are now transitioning to talking about Corbin Burnes, who this came very much out of nowhere. This was a at least I found out through a Nick Picoro tweet that came out just a couple days ago, where he just tweeted out that Corbin Burnes is missing time with a shoulder issue, and had some details on it. It doesn't sound nearly as bad as you might have thought when you first read the headline. The Diamondbacks' plan here is for Burnes to just miss one outing and then come back and pitch against the Dodgers this upcoming weekend. So maybe this is just Corbin Burnes missing one start. Ryan Nelson is going to take his place and start in the game on Monday. But anytime a pitcher that you just signed for over $200 million has a shoulder injury of any kind, Jack, there's naturally going to be some concern that comes along with that.
My level of concern was previously designated at moderate, and
Right.
I am now very concerned. I've increased from moderate to very. I don't think that's an overreaction. He seemed to indicate from reading through Nick's excellent work that maybe this was going on for at least a couple of outings. And that perhaps explains why he was having some of the issues that we kept discussing, right, Jesse? I mean, we were talking about the lack of swing and miss, the inability to both command the ball and also get the kind of movement going on his cutter that generates swing and miss. And obviously, now we know why. He was pitching through a sore shoulder. And these terminologies that are used at the time, elbow inflammation, shoulder inflammation, they're kind of like a very broad term until they either know more or are willing to reveal more. And both of those are factors. Sometimes they don't know more. Sometimes they do know more and they just don't want to reveal it. And that's just a fact. And we've seen that over and over again. I'm not out of school here for saying that. We can go back to the, Blake Walston situation. He went on the injured list with elbow inflammation. And then when I asked him about it, he said, well, I had bone spurs and they told me it was going to go sooner or later, and it went. Nobody ever mentioned bone spurs or the fact that he was at risk of tearing his ligament by, due to fraying from the bone spurs. That was never brought up.
Right.
It was elbow inflammation. So, I take the terminology that's used when a guy's put on the IL or when they discuss these injuries with a grain of salt. The bottom line is they signed this guy, Corbin Burnes, who's a terrific pitcher and super smart guy, another one that's great to talk to 6 years, $210 million. And despite a 3.58 ERA, I think it's fair to say he had not been performing up to expectations. And we come to find out the reason why is he has a sore shoulder. He'd never missed a start since 2020 for any reason. So this is super concerning. We have no idea. if he is going to be able to make his the next start. We know they said he's only going to be able to only have to miss one. They're going to try to keep him out there. Who knows what bullpens he's going to throw, how he's going to react to those. They remain optimistic. That's wonderful. At this point, it's 100% for me, Jesse. Show me. I'll believe it when I see it. When Corbin Burnes is on the mound, pitching and dominating the way that he's supposed to for the type of pitcher he's been in the past and what they paid for, I'll believe it.
This was the quote from Torey Lovullo, and this is from Nick Picoro's story over at AZ Central. Everything pretty much checked out okay, Lovullo said. A little bit of inflammation, all normal stuff for the things he's been talking about. We're glad he knows himself as well as he does. At the end of the day, we've got to do right by the athlete. If we pull him out for a start, we feel like we're going to be in a really good spot. So yeah, I mean, they did an MRI here, Jack. So it's not like, this isn't a Justin Martinez situation where we're just kind of waiting in mystery, not really having any kind of definitive imaging. The Diamondbacks did get that imaging with Corbin Burnes, and it seems to have checked out. But you're right that the team is not going to share anything more with the public than is absolutely necessary, at least not on the record. We have seen situations like this in the past, as you pointed out. So I don't think I'm as concerned as you, Jack, about this yet, just because they have done imaging and because of the fact that they've done imaging and there's just some inflammation and nothing more. I acknowledge that maybe that's not telling us the whole truth, but for the time being, I'm inclined to just kind of take them at their word and see where things go from there. But I can understand where you're coming from for sure.
Yeah, just to emphasize, I'm not saying that he's doomed. I'm not saying that he's going to he's destined to be injured or underperforming. But from here forward, he's got to show me. He's got to prove to me that he's healthy for me to feel comfortable. Just like with Merrill, he's got to be able to prove that he can overcome these cramping issues, and he's not going to get yanked off the mound mid-start on a frequent basis. Both of these gentlemen, unfortunately, need to now prove that they can remain healthy and pitch effectively, which stinks. It's not me saying that they won't. I'm not projecting that they won't. I'm just waiting. Now I need to see it.
Yeah, it's fair. And I guess adding to the equation here, Jack, as we pull up this graphic that you made, there's some history here. Mike Hazen's track record signing starting pitchers to free agent contracts is not particularly glowing. There was, of course, the Madison Bumgarner deal. Diamondbacks wound up paying him off about 2 full years before the contract was actually done. And then we have the Eduardo Rodriguez contract still playing itself out. Jordan Montgomery, that one didn't go so well that we basically gotten to the end of that with him needing Tommy John surgery earlier in spring. And then, of course, still very, very early on with the Corbin Burnes contract, but not exactly off to a great start. Jack, I'll let you kind of break down some of the numbers here that we're showing on the screen for the YouTubers.
Right. And I'll share this for the folks that are listening on podcasts and don't have the video here. So the first column shows the age that the pitcher was signed at. Essentially, these pitchers were all signed at either 30 or 31 years old. Madison Bumgarner signed for his age 30 season. Eduardo Rodriguez and Jordan Montgomery each signed for their age 31 seasons, and Corbin Burnes signed for his age 30 season. The next column shows the baseball reference WAR that has been generated for the team. I chose baseball reference WAR because at that point, it's about what the actual results were in terms of how well did this pitcher pitch for the Diamondbacks, how much did they pitch, and how well did they prevent runs. Madison Bumgarner had negative 0.4 WAR as a Diamondback. Going into today's start, Eduardo Rodriguez had negative 0.5. I don't expect that to change very much. Last year, Jordan Montgomery had a woeful negative 1.4, and Corbin Burnes up through his most recent start was at 0.3. So in total, that's -2 WAR. Now we go on to the cost year to date. Madison Bumgarner, of course, is paid out now. That was $85 million. Eduardo Rodriguez so far has been paid $18 million. Jordan Montgomery has been paid 29.4, and Corbin Burnes has been paid 6.5. This is taking into account the number of days in the season through this season as well. The total is approximately $139 million. $139 million has been paid to these four pitchers for -2 WAR. Now we get to the final column, the balance owed. So Bumgarner is 0. Eduardo Rodriguez is still owed $62 million. Jordan Montgomery, who they're not going to get anything out of course, because he's had Tommy John surgery, they still owe $18.2 million. And Corbin Burnes, who now is 5 starts into his Diamondbacks career, is having shoulder issues, is still owed $203.5 million. The total is approximately $284 million, and it's significant that 203.5 of that is of course for Burnes, but they still owe $80 million to Eduardo Rodriguez and Jordan Montgomery. So They've got -2 WAR. They paid $140 million, and they have $284 million to go. I think the team might need a new strategy when it comes to building their pitching staff.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I guess I have to acknowledge that when each of these moves happened, Jack, I was pretty supportive. Like I did not heavily question any of these moves. Did I wonder if some of these pitchers would be worth what the team was paying them? Yeah. And I definitely acknowledged, like, with someone like Eduardo Rodriguez, you were sort of paying for a non-elite starting pitcher, and you're paying a significant amount of money for that. And so I remember talking at the time about how there is some risk when you pay for more of a mid-rotation guy, because if they drop off a little bit, suddenly you're talking about a pitcher who you might really not want to use all that much. So there was risk there, and obviously we're still pretty early on with the Erod contract. The Bumgarner contract is of course done at this point, and was one of the more disastrous free agent pitcher contracts of the last decade. But Jordan Montgomery, like, I thought that was a great value, Jack, and I was not alone in that. I mean, I think just about everyone around the league did. There were a lot of people who were very critical of other teams, very much praising the Diamondbacks and very much critical of other teams, talking about how they should have done this, right? Like, why didn't this team give Jordan Montgomery a little bit more than that or whatever? It felt like a steal. So I think we have to acknowledge that Mike Hazen, like, sometimes as a general manager, you make decisions that make sense, that, like, you did your job well in a way, evaluating the process and figuring out what a player would be worth on the market. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out for you. Like, at the end of the day, these guys have to perform. So I'm not trying to absolve Mike Hazen of any responsibility here, because certainly he has to take responsibility for these moves. And he generally is very, very good at taking responsibility and talking about how he needs to be better in these sorts of situations. But, it's not like the Diamondbacks drew widespread criticism for any of these moves. I think generally speaking, the reaction was pretty positive for all of them. They just didn't work out. And I should obviously Corbin Burnes in a different category. But by and large, as a group, these moves have not worked out.
I think the last sentence that I said about that was they need to reevaluate going forward how they take care of these types of situations. I think for this team, it's simply, as much as we admire the way Ken Kendrick has plowed money back into the payroll over the last couple of years in response to increased revenues and the windfalls that they got from the 2023 season, and his willingness to extend that even much further this year. At the same time, it's not unlimited. It's still not on plane with the larger market teams. And I think that it simply warrants an adjustment to how they evaluate the team's methodology for building a pitching staff going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. When you
And for the record, yeah, I think that I was generally favorable on all of these, and same like you. I think that at the same time, I mean, you get kind of caught up in the excitement. Oh, they're signing a big free agent, and we all want to look to the positive side of things and think, okay, well, if they can just get at least a couple more good years out of this guy at an elite level, and then they slowly plane down towards league average or something, they should be fine on all the WAR to value calculations. But as we see over and over again, not just with the Diamondbacks, but with other teams, big dollar contracts for pitchers in their 30s seldom work out in terms of bang for the buck. Sometimes they do, and everyone can point to a few examples. But when you talk about signing guys for their 30s and to very large dollars, it generally actually doesn't work out. More 70%, 80% of those contracts don't work out. And I don't think that this team needs to continue chasing the Randy Johnson miracle. Yes, so arguably the greatest free agent signing of all time.
Yeah.
Period. Not just for this team, and I think that maybe there's a little bit of that. Like everybody wants to sign the next 30-something-year-old pitcher that finds that magic elixir and allows him to, pitch at not only the previous levels but even get better. But it's just not very likely, especially in today's game, and the way pitchers' workloads are handled and all of that. I just don't think it's the way to go going forward.
The numbers that you presented, I mean, I can't get over how mind-boggling these are. I mean, just to take a look really, really quick one more time, on $138.9 million, which is what they've invested in these 4 starting pitchers so far. On average, Jack, we expect teams to pay about $8 million per WAR. That's kind of like the rough, some people might say $9 million per WAR, something in that range. So if the Diamondbacks were getting kind of like average value, spending about $140 million that they've spent on these guys, you take 140, you divide it by 8, that's 17.5. So just like down the middle, you would sort of expect to get about 17, 18 WAR if you spend that much money in free agency. And the Diamondbacks on these 4 starters have gotten -2, literally below replacement level, which essentially is like we could have found guys in AAA who were better, is essentially what that means. So not to go too crazy on this. I think we've kind of made the point, but the numbers are just absolutely mind-boggling. Like I feel pretty comfortable saying there is not another team in baseball who has I'm hesitant to use the word wasted, because obviously Corbin Burnes and Eduardo Rodriguez, these contracts are still in their early stages, but I don't think there's another team who has spent this much in free agency on starting pitching over the last 6-7 seasons and done as poorly as the Diamondbacks have.
Yeah, one point I wanted to bring up, there from time to time when this topic comes up, some may try to lump Zach Greinke into that bucket,
Sure.
and that's absolutely incorrect. Yes, Zach Greinke had a rough first season in 2016. That was interrupted by an oblique injury. And it wasn't great, but 17, 18, and up through the trade deadline of 19, he was great. And in total, Zach Greinke produced 16.2 WAR as a Diamondback, and the Diamondbacks paid about $140 million. They paid his salary, plus they did have to pay some money to Houston when he left. And the total amount that the Diamondbacks paid out was 140. And that worked out to almost exactly what you were just saying, 17 WAR for $140 million. His WAR per, dollar per WAR value, I think it came out to like 8.5. So, maybe slightly, a slight overpay. And of course, the Greinke signing happened before the current regime took over. And 2017. So that's the other big differential there. But Zach Greinke does not belong anywhere near that chart for anyone that wanted to bucket him in there. 16 plus WAR for $140 million, more or less market value.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a very common misconception, I think, among Diamondbacks fans. Feels like a lot of people still believe that the Zach Greinke deal was some terrible contract or something. Yeah, not so much. So yeah, we'll see what happens with these contracts. As I've said multiple times, we're in the very early stages with Corbin Burnes. Like, is there a non-zero chance that Corbin Burnes winds up making that start this weekend against the Dodgers and having a pretty normal Corbin Burnes season with just like some bumps in the road in April? Like, that's possible, right? I mean, Corbin Burnes could still have a good 2025. He could have a great 2026. He could exercise his opt-out, and maybe all this money that we're talking about paying him over the next 6 years, maybe it's someone else who's paying that money when all is said and done. So there's obviously still a long road to go with both him and Eduardo Rodriguez, really. Anything else on this, Jack, before we talk about the Mets series here? I think you might be muted. It's our every show muting that has to happen. I'm glad we checked that box.
Thank you, Jesse. Hey, it's a tradition. At least you're drinking water. So I just want to end with if Burnes goes out and has a good game on Saturday and shows no worse for wear, we will come in and celebrate that outing and sing those praises. And I won't even have to say I was wrong, because I'm not saying he can't be or won't be a great pitcher again. I'm saying I need to see it.
Right. Yeah, totally fair. So the Diamondbacks are taking on the New York Mets once again over the next few days. That team seems familiar. Didn't they just play them? Yeah, they did just a few days ago. But here we are. Some weirdness in this 2025 schedule. So the Diamondbacks, of course, took 2 out of 3 from the Mets. The Mets are the only team that the Diamondbacks have taken a series from here over the last 2.5 weeks. These are the pitching probables. Griffin Canning, who has had an outstanding season for the Mets. They have really, their pitching apparatus seems to have really stumbled upon a breakthrough for him, and he has a sub-3 ERA. He's been pitching really well. He's going to face Ryan Nelson, who, of course, is filling in for Corbin Burnes in the Monday game, and then it is David Peterson against Zach Gallen on Tuesday, and then Kodai Senga against Merrill Kelly on Wednesday. Some interesting dynamics here, Jack, with the D-backs having seen both Peterson and Senga just here within the last week. I guess those advantages or disadvantages kind of go both directions. So always a weird dynamic when two teams play in this close proximity.
I always enjoy listening to the pitchers say, hey, when I get to see hitters again in a short period of time, I know better how to get them out. The old axiom always seems to be facing the pitcher again in a short period of time gives the advantage to the hitters. But a lot of pitchers will tell you that they don't believe that to be the case. So I always, that's something that probably deserves a little bit more study and research. Second time around within X amount of days or whatever. There's probably some studies out there about that. It would be interesting to take a look at. A note on Nelson, as you have on the screen here, Jesse, he's supposed to be able to throw 80 to 85 pitches. So his most recent outing, he threw 68. The outing before that, he threw 54. And the outing before that, he threw 36. So there's a progression there, 36, 54, 68, where 80, 85 seems reasonable. Hopefully he's able to be efficient, doesn't have any long innings. That's the other thing to keep an eye on there. It's not just about the total number of pitches. The team would probably be pretty uncomfortable if all of a sudden he had the 25, 30 pitch inning. And I'm sure that the Mets are very, very aware of this entire situation. And that's exactly what their strategy is going to be, run up his pitch count. The other thing about this is when the Diamondbacks faced Senga this past week, they got him out of the game in 4 innings, making him throw 87 pitches. It'd be pretty cool if they can do that again.
The Diamondbacks are, of course, just a little over halfway through this gauntlet in their schedule that we talked about when it first began a couple weeks ago. So far, it has not gone very well, Jack. I believe it's a stretch of 25 games that we had pinpointed. So far, I think they are 6-9, beginning with that Cubs series that they lost. They, of course, lost the series to the Rays, lost the series to the Braves, then won the series with the Mets, and then lost the series with the Phillies. They've lost 4 out of these 5 series so far. That stretch, this brutal stretch, continues with the Mets, and then of course 4 games against the Dodgers this weekend, and then the Diamondbacks go out on the road to face a San Francisco Giants team that has been very good. And then they get a break with 3 games at home against the Rockies, and then it's back on the road to face the Dodgers. So you could argue that this stretch even continues beyond this. Yeah, we kind of talked about this at the beginning, Jack, about how this stretch of 25 games, like you'd be pretty happy if the D-backs went 13-12. But that feels like a little bit of a stretch here as they've started out 6-9.
Yeah, they'd have to go 7-3, and considering who they're playing this week, that's going to be a pretty tough ask. At the same time, it has been pointed out in numerous places, the team is now 18-16, and I think that through 34 games last year, they were 14-20. So
Yeah.
that's cool. Through 59 games, they were 25-32. So, it's still too early to panic. They're going to get through this stretch. The schedule does get a lot easier after that. Hopefully, they also have a run in them like they had post All-Star break last year. I mean, they were playing pretty good baseball. Basically, they went into the All-Star break, I think, a game under 500, but they came out just, crazy good. And I don't know if you can count on that hot of a stretch. So it'd be nice if they could stay above 500. So they're not going to be reliant on going, 25-7 or something, to get back in the race type of thing. That's the hope here. You keep talking about the pitching. That's what it boils down to. The pitching has to be better. This team needs to at least be a league average pitching staff. And they're pretty far from that at this point in time. Not that being league average is what anybody expected, considering all the money that they spent on this pitching, but that's the reality that they face. Right now, if today I could lock in the end of season ranking, would be dead even 15th in ERA, WAR, whatever metric you want to use, I would take that in a New York minute.
Yeah. I mean, you feel like with what you've seen from this offense so far, maybe some of these guys are still going to cool off a little bit, but you've already seen a lot of that regression happen. Like Pavin Smith has come down to earth a little bit. Corbin Carroll certainly come back to earth here over the last couple of weeks. And it doesn't feel like anyone is performing significantly higher than what their true talent level is. So, and at the same time, you have guys like Lourdes Gurriel, who seems to be kind of finding his way again. He had a nice series against the Phillies, something we didn't mention earlier. So I'll see if some of those guys are able to get back on track. Well, that is everything that we have here in this 16th episode of Snakes Territory. We very much appreciate you all being here with us. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are very much gunning for that 1,000 mark. We're getting close, sort of. But we very much appreciate your help along the way. If you like to listen to us over on the audio side, be sure to leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcast. Jack, you can find his outstanding work covering the Diamondbacks over at his website. It's si.com/MLB/Diamondbacks. You can find his work along with all of the stuff from all of his writers over there. You can find us over on social media. I am at Jesse N. Friedman on X. Jack is at ShoeWizard59, and our show is at Snakes Territory. Jack, well, here we are once again at the 54-minute mark. This seems to be becoming a regular thing for us. Is there anything else you would like to add before we say goodbye?
We made it under an hour. That's pretty impressive. I'm surprised we got there. I did want to add one last little point to what you were talking about with different players and who's hot and who's not. It's notable that the Diamondbacks are still looking for their first home run from Ketel Marte. And when he gets hot, that's really going to help the offense.
Yeah. It's a good point. Between Ketel having, he got hurt, about 5 games into the season, and he just came back for this weekend, and he went 1 for 7 with a walk. So at this point in the year, you really haven't felt Ketel Marte's presence at all in the lineup. And we saw what he's capable of last year. If he gets back to being an MVP type player, that would be an enormous boost for this team, of course. And, maybe this offense could wind up being top 5 or whatever toward the end of the season. I don't think that's out of the question. But yes, we could keep talking Diamondbacks baseball here for another 55 minutes very easily, but we'll cut it off right there. Thanks again so much to all of you for being with us, and we'll be back with another episode of Snakes Territory very, very soon.